let's get to it. And I think maybe just quickly for everyone, Kontist is a company that has been developing over the past 4 or 5 years. Me and Sebastian and Stefano met Chris, I think 5 years ago or something like that. And one thing and one thing took the other, and then here we are today. So indeed, here some experience about growing from zero to traction. And then recently, we've been so lucky to be able to attract Ben, who is a experienced entrepreneur and have loads of experience in various forms. And today in the audience, Chris and Ben, we I think we primarily have companies like at a fairly early stage, like I would say from pre-seed to up to A or something like that. We actually have two fintechs, and I think that will be the kind of like starting point for our conversation in terms of the experience of growing from zero, from nothing, and the first decisions you make, and which you have regretted, and so on. And honestly, I'm not really worried with you two that we're gonna get honest and opinionated. So I think that's just perfect. But let's kick it off. Maybe just quickly, Chris, a short intro to yourself and quickly on Kontist, just so people are kind of like on the same page.
Okay, I'm Chris, founder, as Simon just said, of Kontist, back I think more than 6 years. Sebastian goes back, Stockmar goes back even I think 8 years or something like that. Met him first at Startup Bootcamp and stuff, and later on, my founders or Sebastian Stockmar was working on an idea to basically do a financial app for freelancers, and I had actually, it's my 8th company I've been founding, so I know all about starting. I was my previous company called Debitur. It's today sold to SumUp, a big German Berlin-based startup. I was in developing accounting systems over the years, and I've always seen kind of, things need to be done better for the freelancers and automate. And why doesn't that happen? Because we don't have the data. Who has the data? A bank. So I had this idea in 2014, I think it started, or 15, to actually kind of, start a bank. Didn't want to do this initially, was calling N26, BBVA, and so forth, and said, let's do it. You have a cool bank account. I have an accounting system. Let's merge and do something. Didn't happen. At the same time, I've met basically Sebastian Stockmar, who had initially asked me to advise on basically whether we should rather start in the UK or Germany. I was active in both markets at that time. We then talked and talked. From an advisor became basically, why do we merge our ideas? I would like to do a bank. You guys have the idea for a great app. Let's merge it and get started. So that's how we met, and a little introduction to myself.
Very good, Chris. And Ben, maybe also for you, just so we know what's on your in your story.
Sure. Hi everyone, and thanks for having us, Chris. I'm deeply impressed how short you kept this one. I was actually getting to my to-do list of the day because I thought this was going to drag on for a while. Anyway, hi everyone. I'm Ben. I'm the new guy on the block. I haven't started, my CV isn't nearly as impressive as Chris. I haven't started 8 startups. I've done 2. But I did study in Copenhagen, so maybe that's on the plus side. Chris did that as well. I then went into management consulting and private equity for a while before someone asked me to join an e-com company in China. That's how I entered the e-com space, where I spent the last 12, 13 years developing companies, founding companies, exiting companies, and also scaling companies. In my last job, I ran a 250 million P&L for a US a sports company, one of the leading e-com players in that space. So I don't have a lot of experience in fintech, but I'm learning and gaining that now every single day. Joined Kontist earlier this year in January, and basically looking after anything that's not product and tech related at Kontist.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot. And that e-commerce company, Ben, that was Fanatics, right?
Fanatics, correct.
Fanatics, right. Yeah. Which is what, just so people understand?
So Fanatics is, what we did is, it's basically a sports fan gear company, the world's leading one. We did a few things. So we sold fan gear, jerseys, and any kind of fan accessories through our online channels. But we also took licenses from these companies. We produced under the licenses of the club and of big brands like Nike or Adidas, manufactured their own products. We also ran the e-com operations for big companies. So I was happy enough to basically run the e-com stores from anyone from Man United to Man City, Chelsea, Formula One, golf, anything you can think of. We basically ran those. So it's pretty exciting if you're into sports and pretty damn boring if you're not.
Very good. Perfect. Thanks a lot. So I hope that everyone now is kind of like, understands a bit about what Kontist is and Ben and Chris's background. And let's try now to jump into kind of like, at least what you two have learned over the years of building companies, and especially doing it when there is not that much proof in the market and when you're not that sure of what you're actually doing. So I think maybe just to start out with, like, and maybe one of the tough ones, but for Kristen to start with, like, knowing what you know now, like, is there anything that you would have done differently in the first years, like significantly different?
Yeah, I think I would have. I mean, it's a specific a case, but I think there's still some learning for others in there as well. I mean, we were when we launched the market, we were the absolute first like fintech based on Solaris and stuff like this. So we developed at the exact same speed as they. It took them about.
Solaris is an infrastructure bank, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's the infrastructure bank. So it's my supplier, so to speak, was developing the product together with me. And it took them a year. We basically ramped up, built up a team and was ready to do this. And we could have launched like much earlier, but it took us like 1 year from like gathering the first groups until we were actually launching. And at the same time, I mean, we were already kind of, hiring people and building up the burn. And if I had known how long it would have taken, I think I would have kept the team like to maybe 3 people or something, and did all the legal administrative works before I actually like scaled up, right? Because the burn every month is coming, and if you then, due to your supplier, actually only capable of launching half a year later, then you have these costs, and you cannot really do anything about it. So I think that's definitely something. The other thing, which that's not so much, I think at Kontist I was actually lucky, but maybe also because I've had that was my 8th startup, is really to be very like clear and careful, and maybe even spend some more time in kind of making sure who is your co-founders. In reality, also who is your investor. And now again, I'm not saying this because I'm in this call here, but 5-6 years later here and stuff, because I think we can look back in a successful partnership, founders and Kontist definitely. But that has not always been the case, right? So if you put yourself into a position that like money is short and you are kind of need to accept, either I take this cash now or the company is not going to materialize and stuff, that had already led me at some point being not thorough enough in choosing my co-founders and my investors can also make an end to a great idea.
Very good. And I think also for me, actually, for sure, like now I've been through it a few times. I also start to put like a list of principles, and of course there are many ways to Rome, and I think we see all kinds of ways of building companies, but I think it's also just about personal taste to some extent, for having a list of what you see as your principles, and maybe for you, Ben, and also having built a company from scratch yourself twice, and also I think actually having the perspective of being in a huge monster like Fanatics, and also having seen maybe that side, like what principles are on your list in terms of when building a company, being in a company?
So I think, first of all, I'd say that, if you look at organizations of scaling companies, they normally are not like the organizations that you see in early stage. So I think what's really, and sometimes that's hard to admit yourself, and it's hard to actually accept that, but there is a very good chance that the team you're starting your company with is not going to be the team that you're scaling that company with. And that is simply because you need different skill sets. You need to be a lot more functionally skilled. You need probably a different mindset, much more of, you know, how do we scale this rather than let's be hands-on and do everything at the same time and everything, you know, helps out doing everything. You need a lot less later on when you're scaling. I think early on it's just all about product market fit. I think these days, you know, times are changing so quickly. I think you need to be razor focused on making sure that that initial product that you're developing is really that there's really a market for that, and there really is, you know, you understand the customer needs and you understand what you're really building for. And last but not least, I'd say make sure you fund early, make sure you fund a lot. What you don't want to end up doing is, you know, being in that rat race where you basically run every year, you know, you cycle, you do an early seed stage, you do seed Series A, and, you know, you always have a run rate of maybe a year. And basically what you end up being is a founder that's becoming just a professional fundraiser, but not a professional CEO. I haven't thought about this a lot more, Simon. I should have probably come up with a few more smart things.
I think the best sometimes comes when you are kind of like, pointed or cold. But I think the last point is indeed very interesting, and I think it's at least also our experience is that thing about sometimes actually taking a lot of money in can be even though that in the beginning it maybe seems a bit, and of course also it's the most expensive money to take in because you pay it with equity, but at the same time I think you have a very good point in not being caught in that race. You also talked a bit on the team and the importance of that. You actually did both, and I think it's actually just interesting. Also, Chris, maybe just shortly touch upon your comment on your experiences with this. Like, you actually started with 4-man co-founder team, right? And exactly have experienced this thing that Ben actually commented on, which was that actually you're the only one left now active of those 4-mans, and maybe just a few thoughts and learnings from that.
Yeah, I mean, I think now it's you know, now after like 5.5 years and something like this, right? Of course, you have seen the clear journey. Yes, it wasn't the plan at the time actually to start with 4, but then we see them left to you in the back, Madison, which actually from the Silicon Valley, from a very big startup, by coincidence landed in Berlin, and she just started to work for us, I think, for 2,500 euros as a freelancer. And and I didn't get like what kind of gold I had found there. And then like after a couple of weeks, I was just like, oh my God, this is kind of the most amazing person. She has actually done a lot for this company. So I asked her, we all our co-founders, we actually took some of the equity we had and caved it out and basically gave it to her, and that was one of the best decisions I think I've ever done. Although it was clear, and that was of course super sad, that she would basically be leaving the company, that she would have definitely been somebody I would have loved to continuously have on my side like that. Yes, then I mean, there's a lot of early stage, I think, behavior, and Ben and I, we are discussing this often. I mean, I do think there's like certain skills you have to act very, very differently, very proactive, very kind of growth hacking approach, right? Doing things, not thinking so much, but rather the quantity of doing things very high. Whereas I think as later you need to think harder, and then it becomes also more about management of people. So the team, yeah, I do think it is good if you actually kind of openly discuss this in the kind of team and said, let's give each other feedback among co-founders, whether kind of we believe that the stage in which we are in, right, is still kind of the right fit. And I think like making that a very open thing to discuss. I'm very proud, and I have not achieved this in all of my previous company, that actually all of my co-founders, we left in very good terms with, like, you know, handshakes. They're coming to our company parties, they're supporting us as a company and stuff. So we didn't leave with a fight and stuff like this. We just individually discussed and basically said, guys, you know, we think it's not the right moment right now, right? I mean, managing a team of like 50 people and dev or whatever maybe is not what your heart is beating for most, right? So I find this process very good, but I had to learn also the hard way. I've like twice in my life been parting with co-founders in a fight. Today I'm fine again, but that's actually something which like emotionally is, I think, one of the toughest. And also, like, if one of the most difficult things, I would say, in all that, next to the fundraising situations, which are definitely a big pressure, and Ben can also talk about, is definitely the personal, emotional involvement with some of these, right? And this kind of, that is what often doesn't let me sleep at night. You know, the growth hack or whatever we will manage. I think that is kind of a thing we do together or something like that. But if you are in a fight or a disagreement with one of your co-founders, I think that is can mentally be quite difficult.
Very good. And on the side of also team, to some extent, and actually also the setup that you have now gone into, and the co-CEO setup that you have, like, what can you actually maybe just have a few thoughts about that? Because I think actually in Denmark it's quite unusual to have a co-CEO setup. Maybe just your thoughts on why you did it, and the advantages, maybe also disadvantages.
Sure. So I think there is, you know, it's quite unusual in Germany as well. I don't think you see it all that often. You sometimes do see it. And I think two things need to be at play here. One is, I think there's got to be really an understood trust relationship between the two CEOs. And me and Chris, I mean, we go back a while. We are, I think you can say as much, we're actually fairly good friends as well. And therefore, you know, there is no ego in there. And I think that is probably the biggest risk. So if you co-run a company, no, you're not the only one that's going to be calling the shots. There's a constant, you know, weighing off. There's a constant talking to each other. And no, you're not always going to have it your way, but sometimes you're also good. I mean, me and Chris, thank God, we disagree often. We spend a lot of time discussing things, and we consider that to be fruitful. So Chris does need time to get his thinking process going, which sometimes stretches further into the night than I wish it would, but it's helpful for the company after all. So I think that is actually a really positive. And as I said, I think the positives are also kind of, you know, also kind of the downsides in terms of, you know, you sometimes could think, well, it does slow down things. You're not, you know, as quickly in decision making. And you also need to find a way to kind of functionally split up your organization. So as I said, I look mainly after sort of marketing, finance, controlling, all of these things, where Chris is more on the product and on the tech side, and sort of on the ops side. And that has to be pretty clear, because otherwise you're running around, you know, two people trying to do everything at the very same time. So I think as long as you are clear about it, as long as you have a good personal relationship and a clear vision of where you're headed, I think it makes sense. And me and Chris, we spent a lot of time before we shook hands to do this, to make sure that this is actually in place. But who knows, mate? Let's speak in a year and a half, and maybe things are going to look different. Hopefully not.
But I mean, if I can add to that, I look back at a lot of experience. So for me, it comes relatively natural. I've done this actually several times in my life with equal-minded and stuff like this. I do think it is important. When it doesn't go well is when the overlap is the areas of skills you have is too close, but because then you're starting to compete on too many areas. I could actually do this better than he or she could and stuff. If you have clearly kind of some areas where you actually, I would almost say, like, admire each other's kind of skill set and really kind of could say, wow, this is really cool. I could not have done that as good, right? Then I think it becomes like really fruitful. And I mean, I think there's two very positive things about this. First of all is I'm sure many in the room know, which are CEOs and founders, know the feeling. It can be a very lonely job, right? It's you're kind of talking to yourself. It's only so and so much and so forth. And I do think, like in German we say, geteiltes Leid ist halbes Leid. You know, shared problems are half the problems or something like that. So I do think this kind of dialogue helps a lot, right? Because other than that, we quite often have to make decisions which we maybe not be able to discuss, right, and find the right solution. So in that sense, I find that that very good. But it's also another thing, and that follows over to what I said earlier, right? Everybody, I think, including the founder and the CEO, has to constantly ask themselves, am I the right person to do this? And I've never made a story out, or said something else, that I have certain limitations. I'm very good at early stage and starting companies and stuff like this, but I do definitely appreciate, for example, Benjamin's help when it comes to like working with and scaling with bigger companies. And why not like discuss this very openly and say, instead of just like trying to always be perfect, and you're not, just saying it is like that, and I'm actually getting somebody on board. Because I also do know that I still need to be with a company, because I founded this company. I'm an important face in the community and the company, so it is still the best that I'm around, but it's not always the best that I do everything, which I might not be like super skilled to, and where I have somebody else which is much better at doing.
Very good, Chris. I think we're kind of like running out of time, but I just wanted to make sure, Sarah, like if there's any questions, either from the kitchen, so to speak, or from other people in the Zoom call, I think we should maybe try to take one or two. Sarah, you give me a indication.
It's quiet in the kitchen, but you can just crack on for a bit, I think.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. Awesome. But I think actually then the last one thing I just want to touch upon is something which I think is relevant, because I think Kontist have indeed been able to do it quite well. And at the same time, I think it's one of the things that I sometimes struggle to figure out what is the right sequence of things here. And I think it's regarding the kind of like focus on branding versus kind of like just getting things out there and see, as also back to your point, Ben, about product market fit and what extent that branding is part of making sure that, or building that product market fit. I think, Chris, from the beginning, you have been very kind of like aware of the need for building a brand, and today you also, and for actually quite a long time, you've been focusing on this Kontist Stiftung, which is a big brand play. But could you maybe just both of you give your kind of like overall thoughts on the relevance of building a brand early on? Yeah.
Maybe I can just quickly start. So branding, I mean, thank God branding, first of all, is something that lies very much at the heart of Chris and myself. We both are branding fans. My previous companies, I always made sure we have a very, very strong brand. And what I do like to see these days is that branding itself becomes a lot more important. So people often talk about what is the competitive mode of your company, right? How are you going to differentiate yourself really from others? And particularly if you look at fintech and if you look at retail banking, neo-banking, and in a wider respect, you are looking at, a fairly commoditized product. So if you look at a 26, or if you look at, Phenom or a Vivid or Tomorrow Bank or Revolut, or, they kind of, one might offer a feature, the other doesn't, etc. But at the end of the day, it's all, a fairly commoditized product, and few things that really set them apart. And what has played an increasingly important role, even in the space of fintech, is branding. So you kind of, what do you stand for? Like, who is your, and sort of, why do you want customers to come to you? And it's not only just about because you have the best feature, because they identify for what you stand for. And if you look at someone like Tomorrow Bank in Germany, they go for sustainable banking. You see a massively huge trend in, banking for females. You see a, banking for younger generations, or in our case, banking for freelancers. And branding becomes less of a tactical tool, but much more of, it's got to be embedded in the core DNA of the business. Branding is not something that you just come up with, or at least you shouldn't just try, from today to tomorrow, come up with and say, well, I want to have this kind of branding stamp. That's why I'm going to hire a good agency, and we're going to be a strong brand in 6 months. Everyone loves that. Everyone is hoping to get that, that article in Spiegel Online or Times or TechCrunch or, whatever the equivalent newspapers in Denmark. That is kind of the past. Today, you really need to live it. You need to really have it incorporated in who you are. And then that's one of the things that I think we of Kontist have done really quite well, is to build a very trustworthy, authentic, and credible brand. So people do love us, and it will help. And Chris can say a few words, sort of what the core values maybe of our Kontist brand are. But what is, the positive is people are loyal to you, NPS is high, and they will forgive you for screw ups that are certainly going to happen sort of on the product side, So there's a lot of positives. I can only encourage really sort of branding isn't done overnight. Branding takes time. I think that's also clear. It's definitely very, very worthwhile to start investing in your brand early on.
Very good point. But I think like your point about the agency, or like, isn't it like, don't we all agree that the brand, as you said, in order for it to be trustworthy and authentic, it needs to come from the inside, and it cannot come from somebody else outside that might have built it earlier for Airbnb. Because
100%. I mean, it's purpose driven, and I mean, everything we do is purpose, and the world is critical enough. Customers will see right through you if you're just trying to tell a story because everyone is green, or because everyone is sustainable, or because everyone is whatever. People come up with all kinds of angles. They see right through it, and they are actually radically critical about it. Like, if you're just trying to be someone you're not, then it's going to be harder and harder. And I think that's one of the positives. So, I guess, look at yourself. Who do you really want to be? And that's why it helps if you have a personal passion and conviction for what you do. Really make sure that's reflected in the brand.
Final comment on this topic, Chris. So make it worth worth our time. And but yeah, like what's your thoughts about? I know you also are a big brand person, and of course have been a key part of building this brand of Kontist.
I think it's quite easy. I didn't necessarily. Yes, I like visuals and so forth, and I've also studied that and everything. That's true. But down the line, I'm since 15 years, and I'm not saying this is nothing. I would do it without somebody else. I just believe in this course. That's my course in life, to make a difference for freelancer. I do this with Kontist. I've done it with 2 companies before that, and I will do it afterwards. So in that sense, if you have something like I have, I don't have to make it up. I didn't plan this and stuff. I am just who I am, and I believe in the case, and I say that very loud and vocally. And because I don't have to play a game, and I just do what I anyway would do in life, right? It just works. And that's, I think, how easy it is if you really have a cause to believe in.
Fantastic. I think that's it. Thanks a lot, both Chris and Ben. Thanks for taking the time. Thanks for having to watch Copenhagen being back to Corona while being in your respective bedrooms. I think it was very insightful to hear your thoughts on the early stages and what you have learned. And I think it goes for everyone here. Like, of course, if there are things that you thought about that you might want to explore further, like Chris and Ben are somewhat reachable on either mail or Slack. But yeah, I think that's it for now. Thanks a lot, and thanks to everyone for listening.
Yes, and if you have any great candidates, people across all functions, I'm always saying recruiting. If anyone is keen to move to Berlin, we have plenty of open positions. Send them our way. You can't spend enough time on recruiting.
Perfect, Ben. Perfect. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks, everyone. Enjoy Copenhagen. Cheers.